Beirut, the largest city of Lebanon, combines in its twisting streets all of the ancient mysteries of the Arabian Nights with the swift and brutal dangers of modern intrigue. High in the Lebanese mountains, a monastery had been raided and an ancient and invaluable scroll stolen. In consequence, I received a phone call from an archaeologist, Angus Mackenzie, asking me to go to a certain street where someone would direct me to a meeting place. A beggar muttered the name, and the place turned out to be called, of all things, the London Pub. Here I was to meet Dr. Mackenzie, who, until that moment, was unknown to me. Anybody home? Hey! How about some service?
That you, Markham?
Professor Mackenzie?
Yes. Markham, scroll on Arab Queen. You must save.
The poisoned dart had killed Mackenzie, but he'd had time enough to send me to the Arab Queen. I had his ticket and identification, and the impersonation had a chance of working, unless someone aboard had known the good professor. Is this the Arab Queen?
Yes.
Your people said Pier A. This is Pier G. You had a devil of a time finding it.
You are Professor Mackenzie?
That's right.
Another 10 minutes and we would have left without you, Professor. Fortunately, your luggage is... Ah, Miss Graves. I see you found the apothecary.
Yes, and it's a good thing I did. My aunt would never sail without her seasickness pills.
My luggage aboard?
Luggage. Oh, yes. It came aboard this afternoon. I had them put it in your cabin.
Cabin 6?
That is correct.
Thank you. Miss Graves was a considerable distraction, which perhaps was the reason I entered my cabin so carelessly.
The light will not go on, Mr. Markham. I have loosened the bulb. But don't leave. No harm will come to you. I am merely a messenger from the church elders and the Archbishop Paul.
Does the message have to be delivered in the dark?
Yes, and with the door closed, please. You will find the chair by the porthole most comfortable. I regret the melodramatics, Mr. Markham, but my orders are to remain incognito.
What is the message?
First, what do you know about the scroll?
Only that it was stolen from a monastery. It's an old leather roll about 16 inches long and 5 inches in diameter.
Are you familiar with the Dead Sea Scrolls?
Yes.
This scroll, which was found only 10 days ago in a cave near the Sea of Galilee, is believed to antedate them.
And it must be over 2,000 years old.
That is the least of its value. Scholars had barely begun the translation before the theft occurred. But what they did translate caused them to believe that this might be the most ancient version of the Old Testament so far discovered.
Then it must be virtually priceless.
Which brings us to the message. The church wants no harm to come to the scroll. Should recovering it involve any danger to it at all, it is to be left in the thief's possession. Do you understand, Mr. Markham?
Perfectly.
Then good luck.
One man aboard knew of the impersonation. Perhaps there were others. And the scroll, not surprisingly, was not among the professor's luggage. But I was sure now it was somewhere on the ship.
Good show. I say, you're in great form. You know, I should hate to have you chucking those at me, young lady. I'm afraid I'm not in the same class as you, Miss Graves.
I think it's the ship's rolling, Mr. Samuel, not me. I never threw this well before.
Valerie,
Yes, Auntie?
false modesty doesn't become you. If praise is due, accept it.
Yes, Auntie dear.
Oh, I say, shouldn't there be 6 of these, Miss Graves?
But one got mislaid. I suppose on the way to the ship.
Oh, pity. Well, I shan't attempt to beat your score. I shall be most happy if I can hit the target.
To my mind, modesty, false or otherwise, is most becoming in a young lady, Mrs. Graves.
Unfortunately, as my ward, it's my mind Valerie must please, Mr. Bexell.
If she were my ward, she would please me just as she is.
Valerie, dear, I think it's time we're going to bed.
Oh, but Mr. Samuel and I are right in the middle of...
Professor Mackenzie?
That's right.
I'm Mrs. Graves, Professor. This is my niece, Valerie. Mr. Samuel. Mr. Bexell.
I hope I'm not interrupting something.
Not at all. Matter of fact, Valerie and I are just about going to bed. Come along, darling.
You're forgetting the darts, Miss Graves.
Oh, you're welcome to use them, Mr. Samuel.
Oh, that's most generous of you.
Come along, Valerie. Good night.
Night.
Night. Thank you.
You seem to have made a conquest, Professor.
Perhaps she's never seen an archaeologist before.
Perhaps. Nicholas,
Yes?
3 coffees, please. Gentlemen.
But, Auntie, you acted as though he really was Professor Mackenzie.
Certainly I did, and I shall continue acting that way until we reach Athens.
But why?
Would you like to be pushed overboard, Valerie?
Overboard?
He may be a dangerous man. If we expose him, there's no telling what he might do.
Oh, well, couldn't we tell the captain?
This is a foreign ship. The captain and the crew may be in cahoots with him. No, first person we tell anything to is our consul when we reach Athens.
But what about the package I brought aboard for Professor Mackenzie?
We'll turn that over to him, too.
I wonder what's in the package.
We'll let the consul find that out. Now, I think it's time you got ready for bed.
Yes, Auntie.
It wasn't until a few hours later that my somewhat clumsy impersonation began to pay dividends.
More coffee, gentlemen?
No, thanks. It's time I was tootling off to bed. It's been a pleasure, Professor. Mr. Bexell. Good night.
Good night. Good night. Now we can talk business, Professor.
Business?
Yes. Oh, I see. You can go now, Nicholas. You are a cautious man, Professor. I like that. Now tell me, where have you got it hidden?
Got what hidden?
Why fence now? My intermediary described me to you at your final meeting, did he not?
Final meeting where?
You're almost too cautious, Professor. At the London pub, of course, in the back room. Perhaps this will allay your suspicions. $75,000 in Turkish pounds as per our agreement. You may count them if you like, Professor.
Wouldn't think of it.
Then let us complete our transaction.
You want me to give you the scroll now?
Of course.
I can't get hold of it until the morning.
Why not?
Well, if I tell you, there'll be nothing to prevent you getting hold of it in the morning.
That Scottish caution. But I warn you, I must have it in my hands before we reach Athens. And another thing, Professor. No one has ever double-crossed me and lived to boast about it. You will remember that, Professor, won't you?
I certainly will. These darts had no poison capsule, but still there was the sense of something evil and dangerous aboard the ship. It was a game of find the scroll and kill whoever had it.
Who's there? Is somebody there? Oh.
That wasn't me over there, honest.
Who was it?
I didn't see. Maybe one of the crew. Perhaps it's just as well I came along.
Well, I think I better be going.
Sure. But one question first. Why didn't you blow the whistle on me in there? You knew I'm not the professor.
I really must be going. My aunt will be angry.
You're pretty much under her thumb, aren't you?
What makes you think that?
Because it was her cue that made you keep quiet about me. We mustn't get mixed up in things that don't concern us, Valerie.
Who are you?
I'll tell you if you'll answer a couple of questions. Or are you too afraid of your aunt to be seen talking to me?
What are the questions?
How well did you and your aunt know Professor Mackenzie?
Not well at all.
When did you see him last?
In Beirut, earlier today. We met him for a few minutes outside his hotel.
Then you went and played darts with him somewhere.
Auntie would never let me do that with a man I hardly knew. But why are you asking all this?
Because the professor has been murdered.
Murdered? But who would do a thing like that?
That's the question I've been asking.
And you believe the killer is on this ship?
I don't know, but something else is. Tell me, did the professor ever mention the scroll to you?
No.
But it's believed he was trying to take an old and very valuable scroll, which, by the way, didn't belong to him, out of Lebanon. And it's my job to try and find it.
How big a scroll was it?
Oh, about so long, about that big around.
That's about the size of the package he gave me.
He gave you a package?
When I met him outside his hotel, he asked me to take it to the ship for him.
Where is it now?
In my hat box.
May I see it? Valerie was perhaps too happy about it. Nevertheless, we went down to her aunt's cabin. It was necessary to see that hat box.
I'll bring it out here. Oh, Mr. Markham.
She's all right. She's breathing. Somebody just slugged her on the head. But she'll be all right. Where's the hat box?
Over here. It's gone, Mr. Markham. The package is gone.
I thought it would be. The next day, as the Arab Queen plodded towards Athens, I found I'd been both right and wrong about Valerie's aunt. Right about the blow on her head not being serious, and wrong about my first impression of her. As I thought of what had happened the night before, I realized she was definitely a good sport.
Markham, there's one thing I don't understand. Just what did you propose to gain by posing as Professor Mackenzie?
Well, it was one way of getting on board this ship and taking a look at his luggage. Also a way of bringing things to a boil.
Only they seem to have boiled over on me. You'd really like us to keep this quiet?
Be a great help.
Very well. Since nothing else was taken from our cabin, I shall have to tell our council when we reach Athens, though.
Well, if we don't find the scroll by the time we reach there, it doesn't matter much who you tell.
I'm sure you'll find it. Are you coming, Valerie?
Oh, in a second, Auntie. Mr. Markham, why can't I help you look for the scroll?
I don't think your aunt would like it.
Well, she doesn't have to know.
Say, you're really coming out from under that thumb, aren't you?
Please let me help you, Mr. Markham.
Well, we'll see. How good a watchdog are you?
The best.
Well, do you think you can get away from your aunt as soon as it gets dark?
Yes, but why then?
That's when watchdogs are needed. The ship lumbered along into the gathering darkness, and as soon as the passengers were safely at dinner, Valerie and I got on with our job. So much for Mr. Samuel.
You didn't find anything, Mr. Markham?
Not the scroll, anyway. Let's see if the passkey fits Mr. Bexau.
Professor Mackenzie, could you spare a moment? That is, if Miss Graves doesn't object.
Miss Graves doesn't object at all.
Then if you will come with me to the salon?
But, Mr. I mean, Professor Mackenzie, my key, please.
Oh, yes.
Sit down. Some coffee, Mr. Markham?
Mr. Markham?
Yes, I think I know who you are. The young lady gave me a clue just a moment ago. Put that together with a gossip in Beirut, and you are Roy Markham. Not that it matters. I'm willing to do business with you under any circumstances. Here is the money again. Now, where is the scroll?
I wish I knew.
Last night, you told me you had it.
Last night I said I could get it in the morning, but somebody got it ahead of me. You sure you don't have it and this is all some elaborate bluff?
We will see who is bluffing as soon as the others get here. In the meantime, some coffee?
Thank you. We were getting much too close to Athens, and Bexau, I knew, was growing desperate. A showdown had become inevitable.
Now, look here, old boy. I don't understand. Nicholas said a meeting, but what are we to meet about?
I will explain, Mr. Samuel. First, I will tell you about the Arab Queen. The owner is a friend of mine, and the captain and crew are taking their orders from me. So, in effect, you are my prisoners.
Now, really, Bexau,
Be quiet. My prisoners, remember that. Now, which of you has the scroll?
I assure you I haven't. But if I did, I certainly wouldn't give it to you.
My sentiments exactly.
What about the crew, Bexau?
No, I am confident of the crew. It must be...
She was searching a cabin, Mr. Bexau.
Won't you join us, Miss Graves?
She had nothing to do with it. She was just trying to help me.
It was only a sort of a game, Auntie, to help pass the time.
We'll discuss this later, Valerie, after Mr. Bexau's little drama has been played out.
Which of you has the scroll? Very well, I shall find out for myself. Nicholas, give me the gun. Now search the passenger's cabin. A leather scroll with ancient writing on it.
You're wasting your time, Bexau. Miss Graves and I have already searched the cabins.
Including your own, Mr. Markham? Hurry, we are not far from Athens.
The search by Nicholas would be fruitless. And then we would be back to Bexau. And however he meant to force the hand of the one who had the scroll.
Well?
Nothing.
Then we shall have to resort to other means. Cover Mr. Markham while I search him.
Why don't you try using your head first, Bexau? It might be easier.
What do you mean?
Try tracing the scroll. You know that Professor Mackenzie took the scroll to Beirut, don't you?
Yes, my intermediary saw it there.
And you made a deal to buy it from him when it was safely out of Lebanon. But something frightened the professor. So he gave the scroll to Miss Graves to bring to the ship.
I did not know that.
And the professor was murdered with a poisoned dart.
I did not know that either. Then Miss Graves has the scroll.
No. It was taken from our cabin last night after I was knocked unconscious.
That brings us right back to you again, Mr. Markham.
At the time Mrs. Graves was being knocked on the head, I was either with the niece or waiting outside the cabin.
That's right, Mr. Bexell.
That leaves us Mr. Samuel.
That's no good either. His cabin is clean. I searched that, too.
Unrolled, it could be strapped to a person's body. Stand up.
I say this is going too far. I won't do it.
Nothing. Why couldn't Miss Graves have knocked her aunt on the head, hidden the scroll, and then sent for you, Mr. Markham?
Oh, I would never do anything like that, Mr. Bexell.
Perhaps, but I should like to find out for myself. Stand up, please.
Now, just 1 minute.
You're wasting your time, Bexell. The scroll was taken before the knock on the head. By Mrs. Graves.
That's absurd.
Not so absurd as trying to fake a head wound without any blood. I think you'll find the scroll in the knitting bag.
Don't move, any of you. Valerie.
Yes?
Pick up that gun off the floor.
Yes, Auntie.
You remember I taught you how to use it?
Yes, Auntie.
Move over there to the door. Mr. Bexell, arrange to have a boat lowered over the side.
Why should I help you?
I'm working as agent for one of the most influential men in the world. Which do you prefer? His gratitude or a bullet from this gun?
Gratitude, of course.
Then let's go.
It won't work, Mrs. Graves.
We'll see. Valerie, follow us. If anyone comes through that door, shoot. You understand?
Valerie, she's killed twice. Not only Nicholas here, but the professor with one of your darts. Valerie. Give me that gun. Stay here. It's no use, Mrs. Graves. Mrs. Graves. Get down!
The scroll, Mr. Markham.
I'm afraid it went over the side when Mrs. Graves fell. I don't see how the yarn held.
A spider's web can hold the universe, Mr. Markham, if God so wills.
The Arab Queen was held in port stay while the Greek authorities investigated the death of Bexell and determined the ownership of the scroll. Mrs. Graves was in a prison hospital. She'd lived to face trial. Valerie proved herself by the way she took the news her aunt had a criminal record extending across Europe and the Middle East. Valerie?
What's going to happen to me, Mr. Markham? Will I be implicated?
Well, that's up to the owner of the scroll. Why don't we go in and ask him?
You mean he's here on the ship?
Yes, he is.
Mr. Samuel.
Father Samuel, Valerie. metropolitan of the monastery of the Sea of Galilee. Any thought that others might have suspected her part in the affair were quickly banished when Father Samuel smilingly gave her his blessing.